the best response to "Can I have an attention" I've ever gotten. I gotta tell you, this group here, we came in from Los Angeles, most of us, some of us from New York, and I don't know if we expected to see how great looking you all are. Are you all just like auditioning to be on our shows? Is that the idea? Okay, so let's get started. I think we can, I'm going to my laptop right now because I'm going to say a quick statement, and I wanted to make sure I got it short. That's the reason for this. Ordinarily, I would never tell you to work from notes unless you have to, but when you're under a time constraint. All right, so my name's Roger Wolfson, and I wouldn't be here talking with you if it wasn't for a rainy night in Washington, D.C. about 20 years ago. I was working for Senator Joe Lieberman at the time. You can hiss if you want. I know he's conservative. But I was still a pretty junior staffer, and the best parking spot I could get was 12 blocks away from my office. And it was a rainy night, and I had wrapped up work around 11 o'clock, which was early for me at the time. For those of you who worked in Capitol Hill, you know what I mean. And you also know the kind of rain I'm talking about. In Washington, D.C., when it rains in the summer, it's like they've upended like 1 million bathtubs. And it's just complete drenched. And at the time, the nicest thing I owned was my pair of shoes. I had just gotten them. And for some reason, I decided to take my shoes off, stick them under my arm, and roll up my pants legs. And I was just going to walk to my car because I didn't have an umbrella. I'm not saying I'm smart. But just before I walked out into the deluge, I heard a voice behind me. And he said, "How many blocks to your car?" And it was Senator Paul Wellstone. And he had an umbrella. And I knew that he lived across the street from Hart, and so I said, look, I appreciate the gesture, but come on, I'm 12 blocks away. And he said, "Are we going to talk or walk?" And he took me to my car, and I drove him back to, I drove him back to his house. And a couple of years later, he hired me to be his chief education counsel, and I'd be working for him now if he hadn't been killed in a plane crash, along with his wife and his daughter and 3 members of his staff. Now, my reaction might have been a little extreme. I sold all my possessions. I bought a sailboat, and I started sailing halfway around the world. And I landed in Los Angeles, and I started writing for TV shows like Law & Order SVU, The Closer, Saving Grace, etc. But politics didn't let me go, because in 2008, the Writers Guild went on strike. Now, see if this sounds familiar to you. We were a small group of committed, caring people, and we were up against the 6 largest media conglomerates in the world. They controlled all the airwaves. They had all the power and money like we couldn't even imagine. And so if we couldn't get our side of the story out, we were going to be crushed as a union. Our entire profession was in jeopardy. And the Guild asked me to put together a group of politically knowledgeable writers to find creative ways to kind of get our side of the story out to the public. And we banded together on the 3rd floor of the Writers Guild building on Fairfax, and we applied and developed our storytelling skills into a political context for 100 days of that strike, and we won. Yeah. And at the end of 2016, this same group of writers came together and realized, well, maybe we might have something valuable to offer other people struggling against propaganda once again. So this is us. That's a little joke. The Writers' Action Group, WAG, a collection of internationally regarded novelists, journalists, media consultants, playwrights, screenwriters, and TV writers from across the nation, from all social classes, who have come together to provide red and blue state storytelling experience to progressive candidates and causes. We are currently performing work for some of the highest profile members of the Democratic Party in both the House and the Senate, for the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, the DLCC, and now we are here because we're here in front of the most important people of all, which is you. So please welcome Deborah Pratt, the creator of Quantum Leap. Greg Hurwitz, the international best-selling author of 20 novels. We all hate him. Marshall Hershkovitz, the Emmy-winning creator of 30-something and about a dozen other shows. Elizabeth Shapiro, the Emmy-nominated creator of Crossroads of History. And because we couldn't fit them all on the panel, we also have Bill Harper, who is the executive producer of Grey's Anatomy. Heard of that one? Stephen Prinz, who is vice president of Amazon Studios. And Kari Moe, my former boss working for Paul Wellstone, who's also been chief of staff to Keith Ellison. And now we want to hear about all of you. So there are questionnaires that were handed out. Actually, Steve Prinz doubles as the person who hands out forms. But I hope that you understand that's the level of participation we get from people in our industry. They care about what you're doing more than they care about what they're doing. We're all here as volunteers. We're all here because we care, and we're all here because you matter. So these questions. This section, this speech or this presentation is going to be divided into 3 sections. It's going to be a workshop. So those of you who know who you are should probably already be getting ready to stand at that podium. And when I say know who you are, is you should want to grab up to that podium. And we haven't picked anybody. All right, so section number 1 is passion and vision. Where's the fire in your belly that motivates you to sacrifice and run for office? And as it says in the questionnaire here, there's no more important question to ask of yourself. And there's no more important story of yours to be able to tell. And so what we'd like is for some volunteers who might want to go up to that podium right there where the photographer is, no pressure, and tell us, just where is your passion? Why do you care about this? And this is an important part of the question. Why are you motivated to sacrifice to run for office? Because we know that everybody here, by choosing to put your name on a ballot, on one hand, you're entering a noble profession, or at least one that can be noble. It's a holy process to put your name on a ballot, but we also know it's a tremendous sacrifice. Oh, I'm sorry, Richard Eska in the back, also a member of our team. He's been a speechwriter for what? That guy Bernie something? Okay, so who wants to stand up there and tell it? Please, go ahead. Just because, only because I saw her first. All right. That's the room we're dealing with. Like in an ordinary room, no one would be raising their hands. But this is a room I kind of expect you all to. So, no pressure. Blow us away.
Well, I'm not a podium person. I usually like to walk around a room. But I'm going to do my best. My passion
Also, I just have to prepare for her, and this is an example. She's going to get interrupted. All of you both are going to get interrupted, so you might as well be ready for it now.
Perfect.
What's your name?
What's your name?
My name is Brianna Westbrook. I'm running for the Arizona State Senate in Legislative District 22. My passion is my heart. It's fueled me through my entire life. It is why I decided to run for office. I've seen a multitude of different people not represented in the political process. So instead of waiting for that candidate to stand up and take charge for Arizona, to stand up for the issues that matter to me, I decided to become that candidate. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm going to be in politics for a long time.
All right, I'm going to pause you there for applause. What we want to hone in on, and you did nothing wrong, that was fantastic, and you're confident, and you're poised, and you're off to a wonderful start. In this particular exercise, I want to understand, you say your passion is your heart. It's not specific.
Okay.
And what we're looking for is, what's the source of that passion, literally?
The source of that passion would be my life.
Okay.
It's very difficult for me to condense my life into a 2-minute stump speech.
Right.
Because my life in particular, and I find it sometimes being a problem, but I'm not ashamed to talk about my life. I grew up in a life of poverty. I moved out at a young age, at 15. Lived in a household that I had an abusive stepfather. At age 19, I had my daughter. I shoveled asphalt, worked on the railroad. And at 21, I stepped in and raised my siblings because my mom made some poor life choices. And at 26, I came out as transgender. And I documented my entire transition on YouTube. There's a lot of gaps in there too that I like to talk about because it hits home with a lot of people when I talk about it. But sometimes I overshare. So it's hard
Well,
for
cool.
me.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, everything you're saying is relevant. I think we all feel you in a very big way. But your question is universal to all of us. We all have an entire life of experiences that we're trying to translate into the attention span of the average voter, which is incredibly short. So part of the skill of this that we want to teach all of you is, rather than tell the whole story, pick the moment. What was the moment when you decided to run for office?
My moment was when I was at work, when Muslim Ban 1.0 came into effect. And I have a colleague who's Muslim. And I could see in his face, and I could feel him, the amount of uncertainty that he had for his future. And he was scared. Looking into his eyes in that moment that we had, and the words that we shared to one another, really propelled me.
Let's go back to that moment. So, what time of year was this?
January.
It was January. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that day? Can you take us into this moment? And the skills that we're working on right here, guys, is that in the world of writing, specifics matter. Because if you're seeing it in your head, that's great. And you have to start there. But you have to help us see it in our heads. So, and I'm just throwing things out there. You're in Arizona?
Yes.
So we can't say there was snow on the ground or anything. Take us to that moment. Give us, and I'm here I'm going to reference back that there was a reason why I gave my little 3-minute introduction. I started with the rain. What do you remember about that? Yeah, the shoes. It's the little details that matter. The bathtub's upending. Now that's just the way people talk, but it also helps you feel it, right? So in that day, what was it about that day that you really remember?
That it was hot and it was busy.
It's hot and busy.
I work in auto sales, and it was inside the water room. So we have a big fridge that's full of water that we give our clients. And we were basically just crossing paths. It was a rather quick interaction because he was in there, I was in there getting water for a client, and we shared that moment.
And that was the moment you were in the water room?
Yep.
Water room is a fantastic detail, right? Okay, you're in the water room with your colleague. Tell us something about your colleague physically. Describe this person for us real quick.
Not really tall, not really short.
I said your colleague is me, right?
5'7", he's from Palestine.
Okay.
His name's Charlie.
So he's Palestinian?
Yes.
And his name's Charlie?
Yep.
All right, guys, Charlie the Palestinian is a gem. These are the things you want to put. Charlie the Palestinian. We're all gonna remember Charlie the Palestinian. Look for those details to put in your speeches, to put in your stomach. So you're talking to your friend, Palestinian, his name's Charlie. You're in the water room, right, on a very, very hot day. We're there with you now. We're thirsty. Tell us more.
Well, he was scared, and he didn't quite know what the future was going to hold.
How did the fear manifest? Was he stuttering? Was he looking down? Like, how did you know he was
I could just see it in his eyes. One thing in my current profession that I've been good at is just reading personalities and just reading body language. And he knew I'm also in a marginalized class, being an openly transgender woman. So we have a certain connection in that aspect, especially in our business.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes...
Auto sales, right?
Yes.
That's great. You see how this becomes more and more concrete? So in this moment, in the water room with Charlie the Palestinian, in the auto sales business, when you are both in marginalized communities, there was this bonding over...
The future.
Yeah.
What was going to happen? What could happen?
What's going to happen to us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's going to happen to us?
Exactly.
Is anybody getting a little bit of chills? Yeah. This is what we're going for. And can you remember anything about that just really landed? Like, did you?
I cried.
You cried.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to say it. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. definitely not afraid to tear up at times. And I told him at that moment that I will fight for you. I'm here for you, and I will be your voice. And then we embraced in a hug.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay, beautiful. Can we have a round?
This is amazing. It's wonderful. One of the things we learn as storytellers.
Can you speak up?
Oh, yes, sorry. One of the things we learn as storytellers is that an action like that doesn't take place in a vacuum. There's a drumbeat. There's a rising thing that comes up to that. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with Trump being elected and all of that. That was the breaking point. That was the moment of change. And so one of the things to talk about is a little bit sort of where you were and then how you got to that moment. And that makes that moment even more powerful. That's all.
Anybody else on the panel? Elizabeth? Sure, go ahead. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, the one thing I was just curious about as I was listening to your story, because it is so compelling, and I feel like you have this beautiful gift of emotion. Because, you know, I'm also an actress, and it's just, if you feel it, we feel it. And same in any profession. So that's such a gift. And then I was curious, what was your relationship with Charlie beforehand? Had you guys bonded before? Did he have any trepidations? Did you know, are you the first transgender person that he's ever met? I was a little curious about, you know, the backstory of that, because, you know, then you have this beautiful bonding moment. Or maybe you guys were best buds already, I don't know.
Well, I've worked at my dealership for 12 years, and he's had the privilege of knowing me.
And now we all do too.
He was very standoffish of me. We were always friends, but he felt like he was losing me when I transitioned. And he didn't take it as easy as I thought he would. It took a little bit longer time for him to understand. So essentially we grew up over this last 12 years together, and he saw me transition, and he realized that I'm still the same person. Regardless of what I look like on the outside, I'm still the same person with the same heart that's in my chest.
Wow.
So
That just
And
gave me
that's
those.
brilliant.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So one of the things that we, you know, the most overcycled adjective this news cycle is authentic. We work all the time with people. You have no problem with that. So let me start by saying that. But, you know, it's interesting with the detail. Roger was talking about specificity. And it's wonderful if we can boil things down the way that you did. I always think of Stanley McChrystal tells a story about Iraq, where he first, basically they were doing the raids. This was when the SEALs were going in. They were kicking doors, separating the men and the women. The men were going face down, and they were handcuffed at their backs. The women were in a different room. It was during the hunt for Zarqawi. And he said everyone was standing there, and a little 6-year-old boy wandered in the room, and he looked around at everybody, and he saw all the men lying down, and he walked over next to all his relatives, and he laid down on his stomach, and he put his hands behind his back. And McChrystal says, that's the moment that I knew we were in trouble of losing Iraq. And you think about that punch with those details, as opposed to, with policies, it was problematic. There's this many dead. We were hearing this. That distillation into one thing is what does it, and that's what grabs you. And through this process, you got to a wonderful version of that.
And an important thing to know too is, this is a skill to learn. That doesn't mean that just because you connect to emotions or you have detailed, rich stories, that's going to work in your speech or your story or your ask, your fundraising letter. You just need to learn these skills, and you'll start to understand how to apply it. So I think with you, we can move on to the second question, and then we'll get a second person up and go through both of them. This is a way to translate your passion into something meaningful. So it's not just, hey, I can emote really well and feel me, but this is what I want to do for you, right? Let's talk about your vision. So what is your vision for America or your district or your state? This is state senate?
yes.
Okay. It's probably your district. What is your vision? Like, if we elect you, how's that district going to be different?
My vision is a better future for all, socially, economically, and environmentally. I feel like our future's at stake here, that we need to take charge and really make the future that we all envision in our minds right now in this room. That's my vision.
And again, that's great, right? That's a good start. But it sounds a little bit like a politician, even though because it's general. Let's get to specifics. Okay? One way that can sort of fast forward you to it is, how does your district look now in a specific way, and how would it look if we elect you? So let's start with, on the left hand, what is it about your district that you think needs repair? And it's something specific, and it could be as simple as, right now I drive down I-34 and I hit a pothole every 2 feet. And I envision a place where we can drive down there and we can just have a conversation, and I can drive my 90-year-old mother, and she won't even, she won't wince every 2 feet. What's it look like now? How can it look under Brianna's tutelage, or leadership?
Well, how I envision my legislative district is education is critical right now in the state of Arizona. We're next for a strike. It's planned, it's going to be coming in the next few weeks. I envision a learning environment for our young children where they can get the tools necessary to become the leaders for tomorrow. Textbooks, the technology necessary so they can learn to the greatest ability. I envision teachers being paid a living wage in the state of Arizona. And how I see this happening in the greater scale of things is when we achieve it, we can also achieve great economic success and bring businesses to the state of Arizona and not miss opportunities to put back into our economy with these new incoming businesses.
Okay, and that's, I want you to get even more specific than that.
Okay.
I mean,
Like down the
and
road?
it's really interesting because we did a little rehearsal beforehand with one of the people who works for us, Chaz. Is Chaz here? Anyway, Chaz was talking about educational equity. And it took a while to get him to the point where he could say that he had actually gone to a public school in Washington, D.C., but it was in a wealthy neighborhood, and there were 2 teachers in every room. And then when he graduated, he started teaching in a low-income district, Title I district, and there weren't even textbooks, not a single textbook for the first 5 weeks of class. Okay, but it took us a while to get him to where he could say those things. That's the specificity I'm looking for with you. Like, what is that thing on the left that and how it did it right? And Greg, do you want to comment more on that?
Yeah, I had well, why don't you do that? Because I don't want to derail, and then I have
Keep
a
going.
comment after.
So, just recently, I actually finished running a strong campaign for United States House of Representatives. I lost a special election primary just in February. So I just shifted to the legislative district because I felt that it would be the best move. I talked to a teacher in Deer Valley School District who mentioned that he has 42 students in his classroom.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's too many. I envision a classroom with 25 students. Exactly, at
Let's
most.
dive into that deeper. What does that mean? Like, so with 42 kids in a classroom, does that mean that there are kids sitting on the radiator? Let's get to details. Does
Right.
that mean that there are kids who go the entire semester and the teacher doesn't know what their name is? Get us to a specific that resonates for you, and it'll resonate for us.
I'm going to bring it back to something that I dealt with in school.
Yeah.
I had a hard
Even
time.
better than I know the teacher. It's always better than I know the teacher if it's something you specifically dealt with. Go ahead.
I had a hard time. Sometimes I'd get lost in class. I would daze off because I didn't feel the one-on-one attention necessary that I needed to be the best student I could be. And I know in a classroom of 42 students, there's students that have the same feelings that I had of getting lost in class. And they're maybe afraid to ask questions because there's so many kids in class and they don't want to be called stupid. I know I didn't want to be called stupid, so I never raised my hand, but if I had a teacher that was more one-on-one with me, they could have maybe read that from me, and I could have maybe excelled better than I did in school. And I know in a classroom of 42 students, there is kids in that classroom having the same feelings that I had in that classroom in middle school and high school.
That's it,
Yeah.
right?
There it is.
Greg,
Well, 2 things so, with 42, kids in a classroom. I can't do math, but if I could, I could say that's 1.2
Nobody can
minutes.
write 20 novels.
But part of that is it's like that's 1.2 minutes per kid per hour, right? I mean that's another way to distill it. The other thing I was going to say is one of the things that I found totally delightful about your presentation is there's so many details that are unpredictable about it. And I don't just mean being I mean that going back and raising your siblings, having a child younger, the jobs you did, you shoveled asphalt. One of the most powerful things that any of you can do as candidates is to tell your story, and in your story have your voters and have your constituents hear their story also. That's a man from hope. That's what Clinton did quite masterfully. And you have so many examples of different instances, whether you're talking about people, whether it's a direct overlap or an indirect overlap. Education, schooling. It sounds like you went through, I'm sure that you said you were 19 when you took over the Carrier siblings?
Yeah, well, in and out.
Okay, in and out.
21 is when I took them all in.
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't do that like coasting in on a trust fund. I'm sure there's financial stuff
I grew up
that was difficult. And so that relatability, you have such a wealth of different experiences, being a single parent, being a surprise single parent to siblings, different jobs, feeling like an outsider, feeling like you're overlooked, that is widely applicable. And so if you talk about your experience to know that people understand and they hear in your story a reflection of what they're dealing with in their jobs, in their families, in their finance, being overlooked, being made to feel stupid or less than, that's an amazing marriage of the two, and you're doing that instinctively already.
Elizabeth, you want to say? Elizabeth wants to say.
I want to say something quickly. I think that something I just wanted to suggest to you as you're out there, because I know that connecting to people and having people connect back to you is obviously the big goal in the campaign. And something that really resonated for me in what you were talking about, and I wonder if you might want to maybe hit on it, is you seem like the person that sees the people that don't get seen. And I feel like everybody wants to be seen so badly, from the Muslim, man that works in your office who probably no one else realized, it's just a busy day, they don't notice this was a tragedy for him today. You noticed. Your siblings, your parents aren't taking care of them. You see they need help. You step up, you take care of them. Even down to the asphalt, you probably notice when the asphalt needs to be fixed. You're somebody who's seeing the stuff that everyone else is just going through their day not seeing.
And that's also part of where we're going to go on the last section, which is to the idea of brand, on logline. So everyone should be thinking about that, because what's really interesting is what defines you as a candidate isn't necessarily the biggest part of your resume. What defines you as a candidate is anything that is sticky, and that's also what we'll all speak about, hopefully Marshall will as well right now, which is the idea of, in our industry, we don't even know when we write lines, when we write words for actors, we don't know whether that entire scene is going to end up on the air. It might end up on the cutting room floor for reasons that are good, maybe reasons that suck because of the network. Sorry. Sorry, Stephen, and I'll get you my resume later. But so what we have to do is find a way to imbue a character with so much information that even if they just show up on screen and open their mouth, everything we needed that character to convey, even through dialogue, is already there. So that's what we're talking about. What we have an eye for is what it is about you guys that is going to stand out. And it might just be what you were just saying, what Elizabeth was just saying. It might be something different, but already we want to start thinking about that, because that's going to be our third section. Marshall?
There's a brilliant part of your story that I want to think about, because I think it could be very key, which is the fact, and I'll allude to 1960 when John Kennedy went to West Virginia and said, yes, I'm a Catholic, and you should vote for me anyway, okay? You're transgender, and there are going to be a lot of people who say, I can't deal with that. That's America, all right? So you have a story about a Palestinian man who couldn't deal with the fact that you're transgender, okay? The people in your audience who have trouble with you being transgender are all of a sudden having to identify with a Palestinian. And then what you've done is you have put your arms around this Palestinian man. You have humanized him, and you have humanized yourself, and you've won these people over. So to me, a key part of your story is the fact that he was the one who couldn't deal with it. And then you bonded over the fact that you were both outsiders. Just needed to say that, that's all.
I wanted to just add something that I so loved about you, and that was your ability to see people and the ability to care for them and the need to give service to them, which is what I feel is so missing in our government right now. And to stand into that and say, I want to serve this community. I want to serve this country. I want to stand for something that no one else is standing for. And that's what I hear you doing, and that's so moving to me. And I think that's moving to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So kudos.
All right, let's have a hand for Brianna. Anybody want to be next? There we go. Okay, I'm just going to pick the furthest person that, okay, how about you all the way in the back? The one, I think you have red hair. Oh, one, you got to come to the, you got to move quickly though.
You don't have to play on me.
Okay, and just about format while he's getting up there, so we're going to go through Passion Vision quickly with him, and then we're going to move on to turning your issues into stories, and our last section is what is your story. There, see, I timed it just right.
Where's the man who follows Brianna?
Okay. Where's the fire in your belly? What's your name?
Robert Keston.
Robert, where's the fire in your belly?
Universal health care.
Yep. Okay. Why?
Why? My son is schizophrenic and will never live independently and will never be able to take care of himself. And when Congress started talking about doing away with the Affordable Care Act, I panicked and went and made an appointment to go see my state senator. And I asked, what is the New York State Senate doing to protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers? And he said, we have no position on that. And when I walked out of that office, I went there with a friend, and she came out with me and she said, I'm glad you asked questions about health care, because yesterday I was diagnosed with cancer. So not only do they not care about your son, they don't care about me, and would you run for his seat? Yeah. And I, of course, said, no, I will not run for his seat, but I'll help you find a candidate who would be really good. And then I went home and had dinner with my son, and he said, you have all these different experiences, and I think that you would bring a completely unique view to the New York State Senate. And that's when I decided to run.
Excellent. I just want to cue Bill Harper that at some point, since we're talking about healthcare right now, and you run Grey's Anatomy, this is an opportunity perhaps for you to say something when the time is right. So, okay, everybody, you did a great job, right, Robert?
Yes, Robert.
Yeah. Great job, already integrating a lot of this. I'm sure he had none of that prepared until he heard our brilliant but in essence, there isn't that much to add because it was pretty tight too. You know,
I've been doing this for a number of months on the road.
Fantastic. And a lot of people have here too. So please don't let us assume that just because, hey, we write for TV or movies or novels, that you know that we know better than you guys about knowledge. Okay? There's some basic things we want to get across. So I would just say to that you also could, what does it mean? Because you have an expertise that I don't have. First of all, sadly enough, I don't have a child right now, but I don't have a child who has a severe issue. You have experience with that. What does that mean when, I'd also really curious to go a little bit more into how you felt when what did the senator say?
I have no position.
I have no position. Okay, can you take us into your heart for a second at that moment? Tell us something.
Well, I was sort of dumbfounded, and then my follow-up question was, the New York State Assembly has passed 3 years in a row single-payer health care,
Yeah.
And what's your position on that? And his comment was that as long as we are in control of the New York State Senate, that legislation will never see the light of day. So I have no position on that.
That's also a good moment, but I'm still trying to get to.
So
Let me ask you a question. How many hours do you figure you've spent taking care of your son?
in a day, or in a month, or in his
That's a good
25,
answer, right?
or in his 25 years of
Like,
life?
is it even possible to calculate?
It's impossible.
Okay.
As he says every day, you are my best friend, you are the only person I can count on, and I don't know what I would do if anything happened to you.
And-
So
and-
it is a very powerful moment when he suggested that I take this on to protect him and the people like him.
Okay, I want to pause you for a second, because again, that's beautiful. You're doing a wonderful job. But you're still on some level, and this is about exposure. And the directors here, two directors on the far side, may want to comment on this too. I'm still, there's still a little bit of a barrier between what you're saying and your emotions about it. I'm asking you about caring for your son, and what's that, and how hard that's been for you. 'Cause I want to get into that moment. I want to be in your shoes. Somebody, like, give us an example of one of the things that you have to do for your son that, that I wouldn't have to do for my child if my child didn't have a serious mental issue.
Yesterday morning, before I got on the train to come down here,
Yeah.
I was told that CVS would not fill his prescriptions.
Okay?
And so I had to find his doctor and insist that they call in an emergency order, which they didn't want to do because he hadn't seen that doctor in 6 weeks instead of 4 weeks. And I had to fight with them before I could even go to the train station. I had to get that prescription filled, go to CVS, and still make it to the train on time because he was the #1 priority. This would have been
And that's
history.
the kind of thing you have to do on a daily basis, and this state senator is saying he has no position on it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. You start with that. You start with the daily struggles, and give us. That's a good illustration. It's almost too immediate. It's almost too recent, and it's also still that's just you on the phone and thing. I mean, when your son has a moment, do you does he get physical with you? Do you have to hold him? I mean, I want something where I can really see what's going on with you.
Before I left,
Yeah?
he has a fear of getting ingrown toenails.
Yeah.
So before he would let me leave, he asked me if I would cut his toenails because he can't do that. So we sit on his bed and I take 1 foot at a time and I clip his toenails, and then before he lets me leave, he hugs and then he checks them to make sure I did a good job. Because he doesn't trust that even with all these years of cutting his toenails, that I won't flub it up and that he will get an ingrown toenail and he will have to go for a medical procedure.
And let me ask, how old is your son?
He'll be 25 this month.
And your son's 25 years old. And that's what you have to do before you leave. And what did that senator say to you when you asked him if he had a position?
He has no position on that. He had no position on...
End the thought. He has none.
Yes.
You get it?
Yep.
So you take a moment, and I'm not saying, again, he's not really going to do this on the stump all the time, but if this is what you're talking about, you describe cutting the toenails on your 25-year-old son and having to do that on a regular basis, and then walking in to see a state senator who has no position on it. That's where you want to go. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, Elizabeth, you gonna say that?
Yeah, I have a family member who's very dear to me with mental illness, so this is something that I've experienced, and I'm amazed at how little baseline knowledge people have about mental illness, and I feel like you and I take it for granted because we've lived with it. So what I want from you is for you to convey to the audience the stakes of what it means for you to not be there for your son. Like, we all need to know that if you die and healthcare is taken away, what that really means. It's like kind of getting to see the, the ghost of Christmas future or whatever, when little, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Like, we need to feel that, because I don't think people really, understand. And that for me, the ingrown toenails isn't high enough stakes? Like, have you ever had a story where you weren't there, you couldn't be there for him? What have been the consequences when he got off the meds, or something where we can really understand, oh, we feel the stakes of what it will mean if he doesn't have somebody to take care of him when you are gonna be gone?
And see, and that's another writer's lesson, and it's actually on your form, the idea of stakes. Okay, now for me, the emotion was where I was focusing on. For Elizabeth, who's a performer, she's like, I even want more. I want higher stakes. And like I said in the form that you've got, stakes in the writing industry always have to be life or death. They don't literally need to be life or death, but they have to feel like life or death. Okay? And so that's just another lesson to learn, to remember, in order to elevate your story, if you can get to that illustration in particular.
There was something that you said when, there was a moment and you stopped when you said, I have no position on this. And it punched me in the stomach so hard that there was this visceral rush that went through me. And that's coming from you to go, suddenly, and it goes back to what Elizabeth was saying, I realized what happens when I'm not here. If this man has no position on it, what happens when I'm not here? Where does my son go? What does he do? We don't have a system in this country. And then I think it leads to what your vision of what would the world be like.
Yeah, let's talk about the vision then. Can we get to your vision? And then
I just want to expand on that for 1 second. It's
Yeah.
truly great. This is, I saw it too. What happened was, you were feeling an emotion, and it stopped you. You couldn't speak. It was literally a second and a half.
Yeah.
And you stopped, and everybody went like that, okay? That's the difference between a pause and what, in our business, we call a moment. That was a moment. A moment is an interaction. That's what a moment is. That was an interaction between you and the audience because you were feeling an emotion and we knew it and we went, oh my God, what's happening, okay? That is the thing that you pray for, do you know what I mean? And you can, and the thing is, it's happened. You have to let it happen. It's just letting it happen. It's having the courage to feel the emotion in the moment. And if it stopped you for a second, believe me, you've got your audience. So it's just a thing to remember. That happened naturally. It's a thing to keep doing.
And Bill, since you turn healthcare issues
Just
into...
to jump on that, your story has a lot of moments in it. It has the moment where you felt that you needed to go to the state senator. And then it has that incredible moment when he told you that he had nothing for your son. And then it has the moment where you meet the woman and she says, will you please do this? And I feel like you can build to the moment when you shock us by saying, and I said no, I will not. But then you spoke to your son. And then you couldn't not do it. So if you really just pay attention to each of those moments and let those moments really build with it.
Yeah. All right, so let's move over to vision. So the question is, what is your vision for America or your district or your state?
The vision is that we have universal health care, that nobody is one illness or one accident away from losing everything that they have. And in our state, being one of the big states that have been destroyed or will be destroyed this year because of the SALT deductions no longer being relevant, we have to reform our property taxes. And one way to do that is to go to single-payer health care, which will take a huge part of our property taxes that will no longer be deductible and get rid of them, put them elsewhere. But if we don't have health, if we don't feel that sense of security in our lives, we're at a huge disadvantage in everything else that we do. And so my vision is that every American, every New Yorker in this case, feel that at least in that area, they are safe.
Okay, that's also terrific. It's a great speech. Now and this is just to see that we have the tool in the shed. What does it look like now? What could it look like if? That's what we're talking about, remember? What does it look like now where I have to, wait online for 3 hours to see my doctor and then they, whatever, and in my view, you go and you get to spend 3 hours with your doctor talking, whatever the difference, give us both sides now.
Both sides.
Like, what's the, yeah, the
I-
the thing that irritates you right now about it, how it would look if Robert, what's your last name?
Keston.
Robert Keston is sitting in the Senate.
Right now, I mean, I was asked by my doctor to go for a medical procedure. I went for that procedure just 3 weeks ago and was given a $183,000 bill. I can't pay $183,000. I have lousy health care insurance, but because I have the insurance, even though they won't pay for it, that bill was cut down to $1,800, which over time, maybe I will pay. If we had universal health care, and I know other people who are in those positions, if we had universal health care, that hospital, those doctors would be paid. It wouldn't be coming out of my hide. It wouldn't mean that I have to remortgage my house. It means that life would go on in a normal, productive way where I wouldn't be sitting and fretting and worrying about what's going to happen next and who's going to put food on the table.
And neither would you.
And neither would you.
Okay, so now, were
Thank
you on the call, by the way, then? Because I remember that,
No.
because that's the second $183,000 bill I've heard about.
It's one of those regular
Do you
calls.
still have it?
At home, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just got it.
Why you want to pay it?
No, it's not something I carry around. It's not something I want to be reminded of.
Actually, it is. Okay, so this is really important. Everybody hear this. One of the most important things I'm going to say to you. I'm standing because I don't want anybody to miss this. Take that bill and you're going to hold it up during your speech. Okay? Now that's the power of props. Now the reason I asked you this is because we were on a call where we did some training for some other candidates. And she said that the reason that she ran, she was describing how her mother was being charged $2,500 for one pill and they couldn't afford it and all that. I was like, find that pill. If you have to make one up, make one up. Props aren't always real, but like, hold that sheet of paper up and show the number to people. $183,000.
And you just
Those
have to-
moments, you can build a campaign around a letter or a pill. And every one of you have your own little props. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, you just have to make sure it's not accidentally like your Verizon bill. You gotta be on point with it. So the other thing is this is a great template, and Roger, this is going a little bit into the branding part. Are we not doing that yet?
That's okay, go ahead.
So I mean, there's a couple parallels that you can start to draw out from this, which isn't just the hardships that you've endured and can be avoided, but part of it also is like, you want to be productive. You want to be working in society, and you want to be handling your own business, and you want to be taking care of your family. A healthcare disaster takes you out of that for your son. It takes you out of that for your community. And the more you can talk about the robustness of the community, would you rather have people working, or would you rather have people losing their jobs because they can't afford it, and losing their houses, and digging out and not contributing to society? And so with healthcare, one of the things that's so powerful about it is everybody knows if you have a sick parent, if you have a kid who's in need, if you have a bill that you can't handle, it removes you from the whole community in the sense that we all want to give back and contribute for everybody else. And you can start drawing parallels into jobs and job productivity. And you can start to sort of streamline that out in ways that begin to relate to everybody and talk about people with sick parents and talk about people with sick siblings. And there's a way to kind of expand and grow that out into arenas that are more broad reaching. Because as you said, a healthcare disaster wipes somebody out now. $183,000 bill you never get out from under.
Yeah, big round of applause for Rob. Okay, so the next section, and this was a perfect segue, Robert, to the next section, which is turning issues into stories. This is going to be, so once again, you guys we're all in this room up against the same forces. You know, and it's not Donald Trump. I mean, he's bad enough, but it's the Koch brothers, it's Murdoch, it's Sinclair Media. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to make our stories, if we're trying to get people, persuade people to vote for us, or to pass our bill, or to get something to the state legislature, we have to be able to turn that issue, that perspective, into a story that so people cannot look away. So is there anybody here who wants to pick an issue or a bill or, look at these hands down, this is great. Actually, you know what, Deborah, I'm gonna ask you a favor. I want you to pick whoever comes next, because I don't want to be the person who.
This wonderful woman right back here.
Okay. All right, so you can blame, everybody else blame Deborah for not having picked them.
My name is Mayana Kingery. I'm running for...
Mayana?
Mayana Kingery. I'm running for Josephine County Commissioner in Oregon. Our county's been recognized nationally 4 times. The first was for lack of law enforcement, so the cartels moved in and started tearing down forests and growing pot and selling it. We were recognized for our poverty and our opioid crisis. We're second in the nation for opioid abuse.
Oh, who's first? Who wins?
Is it South Carolina?
It's okay.
For our graduation rates, because we're down to like 52% graduation rates. And our county commissioners just a week and a half ago sued the state in federal court, saying that the state did not have the right to make cannabis legal medically or recreationally, and invited Attorney General Sessions to come into our county and use federal oversight for our issues.
So that was all terrific, and you've got an engaged, responsive audience. I still don't know exactly what your issue is. So what are you trying to pass? What are you trying to do?
Our issue is corruption in the government.
Okay, now
The county commissioners will make their decisions behind closed doors, and this is no secret. Everybody in the county knows. They make their decisions behind closed doors, then they have a commissioner meeting and everyone gets 3 minutes to speak. And they sit there and they write and they do this and they never look you in the eye. They never listen. Your voice doesn't matter. And I had 2 sets of great-grandparents in Josephine County. My grandfather took Teddy Roosevelt down the Rogue River in a boat when he was exploring the West. And this is not the county that my great-grandparents helped build.
Again, great material, great details and like, I still don't know what the issue is that you're trying to pass. Like, what are you trying to do specifically?
I'm trying to get inside the government because all change happens from within. And
What will
if-
you do
and
once you're inside? See,
Inside,
everybody, this is, we all have to go through this
Right.
exercise.
sure.
You know, what will you do if you're inside?
I will listen. I have a listening ear. You know, I learned that
Okay, I'm going to stop
whenever-
for a second because you do have a listening ear, but you're not listening to me right now. Which is, I want to know what you want to do. Now, get in there and listen. That's not going to buy my vote.
Okay.
Who do you want to put in jail? What's the initiative that you want to pass? What are the new standards that you like? We need to have standards so that, you know, the full disclosure of every dollar, whatever the specific thing you want. That's what we're doing in this exercise. And if I'm listening to you, even if I'm engaged and clapping and entertained, if I don't know what you're after, you know, I'm probably like listening and clapping and switching channels and checking my phone.
Okay.
What's the specific thing you want to do?
I want to build community. I want us all to come to the table together and decide what's best for our county
It's
together.
still
All
not
of
there
the-
yet.
Who's the person you want to take down? What's his name?
Well, it's an example.
Well, I'm just asking, right.
Well, Dan DeYoung is the man who's leading. He will still stay on the
He's
council.
not in this room, right?
No. He'll still be on the commission when I'm in there. So being able to bring the 2 of us that could work as a team to overrun his power and his agenda, that is necessary to be able to help our county thrive, because our county has a GMO-free zone. We have the opportunity to be a leader in the nation for healthy produce.
Right.
And we're all about farms. And they're trying to stop grandma from selling her eggs on rural residential land, yet they'll let a mining company build a mine on rural residential land. So we need to have some standards, some
All
qualities,
right,
some
give me a standard.
accountability.
Can you give me a standard that we want to have?
A standard that says what you can do on your land. It needs to be held accountable. We need to then enforce it and not run and fly off and sue everybody because we didn't do our due diligence to make our county laws.
All right, let's just pause for a second. You see, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Now, I'm saying, just in the same way that on this side, everyone's thinking, oh boy, I wish Roger would shut up, because I got a great point to make. I bet you there's a lot of politicians in this room or no, right? You guys are thinking, boy, if I had the podium, I would just say, hey, it's SR 2424, and it's gonna do exactly this, right? Well, this is part of your process. Sometimes I'm actually happen to be a commissioner in the city of Los Angeles for animal services. I'm a dog catcher. I had to learn how to talk about the policies that I want to set. And so I think we're going to try somebody else for a moment, but I want you to think, and maybe you can come back, an actual specific bill, rule, standard of law, and come back and think about it and come back to it. Okay. Deborah, you want to pick the next person?
Could I have you?
Yeah.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Brandon Woodruff. I'm from the great state of Tennessee.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Yes, sir, I can. I'm Brandon Woodruff. I'm from the great state of Tennessee, and I'm currently running for Tennessee State House.
Yeah.
So, in 2015, I was working in the state legislature as, a little guy, like you were talking earlier. And I was an intern from my college. And in 2015, the state of Tennessee voted down this thing called Insure Tennessee. What Insure Tennessee would have done, it would have essentially given health care across the state, affordable health care across the state to all Tennesseans, and would have enabled them to be able to take care of those needs in which we've been talking about today. A Republican governor actually is the individual who proposed the bill. We live in a state that there's a supermajority of Republicans that run the state house and the state senate. So, a lot of us had the idea that, hey, if a Republican governor is proposing this, it might actually pass. It failed. And not only did it failed my heart. It failed my heart because in 2006, my mom was diagnosed with kidney failure. I was about 12 or 13 at the time. I was a middle school boy. My mom's a single parent. And being from the inner city, it's a lot of things that we didn't already have. My mom, making about $2,000 a month already from her job was decreased because we know Social Security disability on average pays about $750 a month out to its recipients. My mom luckily got $1,009. So we struggled. We struggled growing up. From just thinking about the sacrifices she made to having me being able to be involved in sports, to think about the sacrifices that she made working 2 jobs to still not equate to enough money to have and make a livable life for her and myself. It outraged me at 12. 12 years old is when I decided that I wanted to do something about it. 12 years old is when I decided to ask questions as how I could begin to make changes in my mom's and my situation. But I soon found out that insurance companies and medical facilities have the ability to dictate what they will and will not pay for. I've seen my mom being denied going to the primary facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because the insurance wouldn't pay for it. She had to go to the secondary.
This is wonderful, right? Is this wonderful?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that also we can use Brandon as an example, and I want to prime the panel to talk about presentation and to talk about individuality, because you exhibit tremendous presentation and you're a character the moment you take the mic. And I feel underdressed already. So we're going to talk about that in a second, but I just want to say what you've done actually is a beautiful example of integrating the passion and the vision and the turning of the story, doing it all at once. I just want to, at this particular section right now, focus just in on the issue. So I want a shorter version of, and you'll get a chance to think of it while they're criticizing your presentation or critiquing it, I mean. But hey, you elect me. This is the bill I'm going after. This is the why. I just want just those details and shorter. Okay. But take a second if anybody wants to comment on his wonderful presentation as a person.
Well, you just said what I was going to say, which is what I do every day in my job, is I take a speech and I cut this sentence and I cut this sentence and I cut this sentence, and all of a sudden the speech is actually even stronger, okay? There were 4 or 5 remarkable sentences that you said, and I would have started the whole thing probably about when you were 12, okay? It's very easy to lose people. It's really, and we lose people in a subliminal way. In other words, you're talking, they're still listening, but in some way their engagement goes down, okay? So there's a certain amount of self-editing you need to do so that you begin to understand, okay, what are the things that grab people, you know? And sometimes, I have to learn this lesson again and again. As a dramatist, as a writer, I often will say something 3 times and I realize, oh God, if I'd only said it once, it would have been stronger, you know? So just be mindful of that, okay? And I want to know, I just want you to follow up on something, because you were just getting something amazing. You said at 12, you decided you wanted to change it. What did you do? What did you come up against? You started to tell a story, but that's an amazing story to tell, that a 12-year-old starts to take responsibility. Is there a little more you can tell us about that?
Yeah, man. That's my life, right? So, just being 12 years old, I remember very vividly, and it's ironic that you all do what you do, but I was at a performing arts school at 12 years old. And essentially, because of my mom's medical condition, it distanced me from not only being involved in my performing arts, but also my friends that were engaged and had parents that were healthy, that were able to provide and secure the resources that their children needed to propel as actors, singers, dancers, and so on. So, I think that's one thing that went into me being a 12-year-old. Also, thinking about me being a 12-year-old and no father in the home, I think that played a big part in it as well. Because not only am I thinking about, Medicare or the lack thereof, I'm also thinking about a deficient income in the household. Just one income, and then we're one tragedy away. I was at my tragedy, but one tragedy away from life not being as high I used to know.
All right, so Mark, just real quickly, can we use it, because I know, I want to take what you're talking about now into the issue, because I just want to stay on section, because, and I was at my tragedy. How many of the writers just like have bingling, like if he doesn't use that, I'm going to stick in the script. I was at my tragedy. The cameras are rolling too, so I can't no one will steal it. Thank you. When I was at my tragedy, can you build off of what, because I think you can take notes well. Can you build off of what Marshall was saying and take us back into the issue?
Yes.
Okay.
So at 12 years old, I found myself, unfortunately, at my tragedy. And so it motivated me to continue to get my education in arenas that would land me in politics. And so why I'm here today before you is because I want you all to believe that I will be the champion to expand in Medicaid and Medicare in Tennessee. I believe that Insure Tennessee can work, especially because it was presented to the body by the majority of the House. I think that it can work. And I don't think that it works. I know that it can work. But the only way it can work is if you all elect individuals like myself who make it a priority to go into the State House and to fight until I can't fight anymore, until every last one of you all are benefiting from a statewide Affordable Care Act in Tennessee.
Moment to that.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were 12 years old and you found out that your mother had kidney failure, the reality that you could lose her, be on your own, and there was nothing you could do, made you realize you had to do something.
And I've had that thought every year
But
since
you
12
say
years old.
that because now we see what's at stake. A 12-year-old child had a mother.
You say it and you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important.
The
And
only
when
thing
you
I'd
feel
add
it.
with to her, what I kept wanting
Yeah.
is, I want to know something, one thing about your mom that isn't sad.
Yeah.
That's something that makes me fall in love with her. Like the fact that she would always, I don't know, like I binge watch Dateline. Like just something where you're just like, oh, I know her. You know, some little specific thing that's the only thing
Lifetime.
you need. Okay,
I'm
you know?
12 years old with a single mom. I'm talking about I know every.
You know every
episode of
Lifetime.
All right, so I have one general. So first of all, you're blazingly charismatic, which is helpful. So,
That's a plus.
That's a plus. One of the things that we got to with this, and you take notes and feedback well and integrate them lightning fast. But one thing for everybody else to think about is the point that Marshall was making about sort of condensing this and starting when you're 12. We have a saying when we write, which is start in the middle of a scene and write your way out.
Yeah.
Right? Start at the moment that is we call it a cold open in TV, where something insane's happening that grabs your attention, and then you figure out to provide the context as you go. And by you shortening it to that moment, you're starting in the middle of it. And that's one thing to think about, because it's not a normal way to think. Just because you want to enter politics and do well doesn't mean necessarily that you come, packaged with all of these things. It's not common knowledge. So think about your stories and think about what the most arresting image is. Start in the middle of the story and then write your way out of it, which you just illustrated how powerful that can be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank everyone. Thank Brandon. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Greg pick the next person, and we're moving on to the next section, which is what is your story? Okay, and this is your elevator pitch. You all have to do it. I'm sorry, Greg already did this. Greg picked somebody. It's not me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You.
Please come.
Yes, please.
So my name is Nicole Musalam, and I come from Malden, Mass. Last year, I ran for school committee, and I'm thinking of either running for school committee or city council next year. But for me, the main issue that I see is the working class family
Nicole?
and the
Did you say
many.
Nicole?
Yes, Nicole. The main issue I see is, the plight of the working class family. And I say this because I don't remember much from when I was 5 years old, but what I do remember is living in the back of a truck with my mother when we were homeless. I remember when we didn't have enough to eat, and my mom would sit at a table with me, and I would get the food. And she would tell me, honey, don't worry. Mommy ate already. I remember at times when even that was not possible. And my mother taught me how to identify what was good to eat out of a dumpster from the back of the store.
And I'm sorry that this is beautiful and emotional and heartfelt. And I think everybody in this room is in the palm of your hand. In this particular section, what we're working on is, what is your brand? What is your elevator pitch? And so for that, just understand too, okay? So let's use this as an example. We're all moved and we're all affected. This is good information. But it's a very important segue into the fact that just because it's important and touching doesn't necessarily translate into a vote, okay? So what we've got to do now is think about your resume. And your resume is your whole life. Your resume isn't just what you've done professionally. Sometimes your resume, there's a woman, I don't know if you guys have seen the ad, it's Erin Collier, right? And she's Run Erin Run, and she is running for, I guess, Congress in someplace in New York. But her whole ad is just showing her running, and she's building on the fact that she's a triathlete. Like, she's not, the fact that she's a triathlete doesn't necessarily make me want to vote for office, but by playing in with Run Erin Run, and the whole idea of beating people, and she's up against 6 guys, and she's like, I'm not going to let the boys win. And it's a very good commercial. But it's also a good example of how she turns something about her into a brand. It's not always the low-hanging fruit. It's not just, Brianna, it's not just, I'm transgender. I mean, I'm in auto sales. It's something about you that's distinctive and that you can translate into, I will be effective for you. So that's all that we got to focus on, is getting the audience to remember us, believe in us, pick us out, and believe, wow, that's somebody I vote for. So what is it about you? What's your elevator pitch about you?
I'm a fighter.
Okay.
I've overcome so much in my life, whether it be poverty, domestic violence, which was in the home growing up, being from a marginalized background. I am someone who I never accept no as an answer. I never just accept the status quo or being told
Okay,
that what
Suzanne,
you want
this
to
is all
do is
good.
impossible.
Forgive me, this is all good too, but it's still generic.
Okay.
I mean, you know, anybody, you know, what you're asking somebody to vote for you, okay? So, you know, I'm loving it right now. You know, I'm like, oh my God, I want this person as a friend, and isn't she amazing, and I want to hear her stories. But I'm not like, yeah, this person's competent. I'm gonna, you know, this person's gonna get shit done for me. This person's gonna help my poverty or make me worry less. And by the way, a little secret here is that if you want to, in an audience, to get your male audience to nod, you talk about ways that you're going to actually get jobs. To get the women to nod, you talk about ways that you're going to give them more time. This is just poll data, okay? But you have to be thinking about your audience while you're thinking about yourself. It's a complex equation. Let's talk a little about your resume. What have you done professionally?
So for the past 5 years, I've been an activist in the Islamic community. I was the executive director for the Islamic Society of Boston.
Okay.
I earned that title in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing.
Okay.
I was the one who, after only being at work for less than 2 weeks, handled the media crisis that we faced at that time.
Wow.
With no training or background, I learned on the fly. I'm the one who organized a solidarity walk from the steps of Cambridge City Hall to the mosque in...
Okay, I'm going to begin. This is dude, you have no problem with emotion, and you have no problem with connection. I'm still trying to find where, now, where you're running. Is it a majority Islamic community?
No, actually, it's a very working class community. We're facing a lot of struggles
Okay,
right now.
so this working class community, to be honest, may not care about what you're talking about. They may love you and want to be friends with you, but what, like,
But these things
literally, how
illustrate
much
that
money
I'm a
did you
hard
raise?
worker.
Did you have to raise a lot of money?
So on that last year in my city, we had what's called a fast-a-thon. I fought 5 years to get this done because everybody told me it wasn't possible. We invited non-Muslims to fast with Muslims during the month of
Okay, you're not
Ramadan.
hearing my question. I'm sure this is going to be another amazing emotional story.
But
But what I'm talking about is, I've raised $500,000 and I've spent it in effective ways. You see what I'm saying?
we paid
wanna
off
get to-
50% of student lunch debt in our district.
Okay, so you raised money to pay off what?
Student lunch debt.
Are we on to something here? Or are we on to You paid off student lunch debt in your district?
50%, yes.
50%, half of the student loan, of the student lunch. First of all, forgive me, I used to be chief education council of the Democratic Party. I don't know what you mean when you say student lunch debt. It sounds great though, but we're on great.
So in our district, a child is allowed to go up to negative $20 on their account and still receive a hot lunch. After that, they're given a processed cheese sandwich for the entire day to sit in a classroom and learn what they need to know in life.
Are we getting somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now I'm like, okay. You know, so, and you saw this problem?
I did, and I got stories from parents as we were doing this and people who
Were
came
you
up
the
to
one who
us.
said, I'm gonna do something about this?
Mhm. That's why we chose it.
Thank you for telling me now.
Guess where I would start?
And now, the things that you talked about earlier, which are deeply moving and which you're deeply connected to, can threaten under it. It's not that those things aren't valuable. It's not that those things aren't engaging for us. For me, so much so that I wanted Marjorie to be quiet and throughout the whole panel just to hear them. But that's not the aim,
Yeah.
right? So all of those things that you're a fighter, like you're unlikely by dint of who you are. You're an unlikely person. And your point to say that you fought for that, you fought through homelessness, you fought through domestic violence, you took over a job that you had no business being in to handle the entire media reaction to one of the biggest terrorist
5 minutes?
attacks on the, on the city, the defining event for Boston, and handled it with solidarity. But then if you can start to apply that to the policy to say, all those things that I got through by dint of who I am, here's how I'm applying them for you and your community. Then you have all the emotion, but you're also applying it more broadly beyond just the personal emotion. And it's the marriage of those two that's really beautiful.
And I think that the thing that comes to, okay, first of all, I'm from Chelsea, Mass. So I used to go to the Meadow Glen Mall in Malden. Like, I'm all over everything. I feel like, part of the challenge and the beautiful thing that we have right now in this time, and part of what we do as storytellers, is we're empathy machines. So we create stories and we allow people to see through somebody else's POV, right? But we're also in this moment of history where people are scared to death of other people's POV, right? But when people hear your struggle and they hear, oh, that's gonna fight for me,
Right.
then suddenly your otherness, the thing that we work on as writers to try to help people overcome, to see the commonality in everyone, it disappears, right? Because you become the fighter for us. Like, your overcoming homelessness is not like, ooh, I don't know, I've never met anyone that was like homeless before. It becomes like, oh, well, I want her on my team. You know what I mean?
And when you talk about what you care about, it's like, guess why you're so mad about one processed cheese sandwich for a whole day?
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
anything in your background relevant to that? Right, I mean, you're telling your story that's the story of that. As you expand it, you can relate to all of those things.
I am a statistical anomaly. I was told many times when I was younger that I shouldn't get my hopes up, that I wouldn't be able to do things. And I've overcome a lot through lots of hard work and sheer luck. And the reason why I want to run for office and advocate for people is I want to be that rung in the ladder to help other people get up, because it's not easy. It really isn't. And we need more of us out there. So I want to help to create policies like Raise Up Massachusetts that fights for the Family Medical Leave Act. It fights for $15 minimum wage. I want all of these things for our families, so that a child doesn't have to go without their parent because they're working all the time, or they're going to bed hungry. Because I've been there.
You're a fighter who will fight for you.
Exactly.
Oh, go ahead, Marshall.
Okay, I'm a director as well as a writer, and so I come at things often in terms of behavioral aspects, okay? And each person is different, obviously. The first 3 minutes you were talking, the impression I had was, this is an incredibly vulnerable person, and I wanted to protect you, okay? And then all of a sudden you're saying you're a fighter, and I'm going, oh, she's a fighter, okay? I didn't get that you were a fighter right off. Now, someone else could say the same lines and would come off in a different way. So I'm speaking specifically about you and how people are going to take you, okay? The emotional part of your makeup is very available to you. Most people, I would work for hours with them to get that available, okay? You've got that, all right? The part that's a fighter, I think looking like a fighter, sounding like a fighter, finding that part of you emotionally that is strong and that can be angry and not afraid to be angry, okay? So that people can look at you and go, oh, okay, I'm gonna stand behind her. She's gonna protect me, okay? Because that came through, but it took 8 minutes to come through. It needs to come through in 5 seconds, you know what I mean? So that's just a personal, it's just how you experience yourself and the parts of you that you find in yourself. They're all part of you, you know what I mean?
And so, would I stay there for a moment, because I want to see if we can get one more thing out, but we're about to end, guys, because at least one senator's about to speak. And we're going to be watching too. But I just want you to know, because we didn't cover as much as we wanted to, we have a booth. Some of us will be at the booth, I'm not sure how much. But also what we're doing here as a group is we represent a group that has over 200 writers, all of whom with significant experience. And what we're trying to do is we're matching up our writers with candidates like such as yourself, so we can provide writing services. We can provide these kinds of services to you. We can really help you with storytelling. And in fact, we're offering things like writer's insurance, where you can send us your materials that your speeches and your fundraising letters, and we can revise them and send them back. So we have. Would that be helpful? But anyway, so you can learn more about it at the booth. And we have another session today at 3. So if you'd like, feel free to come back or tell people to come, because we want to get as many of you in this room so we can really speak to your hearts as possible. But just closing up what we were saying with Nicole. Okay, if we had a little bit more time, it's just finding that specific, brief way to describe you that conveys the fighting element without just saying, fighting to fight to fight. It's like we want to be specific. And that's something that you should know that writers have to do on a daily basis. In our script, when we write something, the toughest words to write are the descriptions of characters. Because every once in a while say, use 3, she's funny and she's silly and gorgeous. And it's like, yeah, she's Hollywood. What's she gonna be? But, we have to find that phrase, that term that really sums it up. So we want you guys to think like writers, and we want to help train you to think like writers about yourself. What is that phrase? What is that element that really, that the part that stands for the whole? And if we had more time to work on it, Nicole, maybe we will later today. What you did with these school lunches, I want to applaud you for it. And I want to say that, and we want to applaud all of you.
Yes.
All of you for putting yourselves out there.